What I repeatedly encounter in the comments section on this channel are statements like,
one fitness influencer says this, another says the exact opposite.
They're all selling something. The entire fitness industry is commerce-driven and hopelessly confusing.
I don't know who to believe anymore, or what I should actually do to become bigger and stronger.
Mike Mentzer confronted this same problem throughout his bodybuilding career and his later years as a personal trainer. In fact, the very first chapter of his revised 1993 book, Heavy Duty, was entitled Bodybuilders Are Confused. But by the time he completed Heavy Duty 2, Mind and Body, in 1996, there had been a profound evolution in the way he presented his ideas. The earlier Heavy Duty focused primarily on the practical mechanics of bodybuilding, developing a realistic perspective, understanding the role of genetics, and properly applying the principles of intensity, volume, and frequency. But in Heavy Duty 2, something deeper had entered Mike's thinking. The book had become infused with philosophy, critical thinking, and the disciplined use of logic itself. Even the chapter titles reflected this transformation: Either Or, Another Kind of Definition, and The Mind, Check Your Premises. Mike had come to realize that the problem in bodybuilding was not merely determining which training method to follow, but learning how to think about training in the first place, how to critically evaluate ideas, identify contradictions, define concepts clearly, and distinguish logical consistency from mere popularity. His goal was not blind allegiance to another guru or system, but intellectual independence, the ability to rely on your own rational judgment rather than the suspect opinions of others. Why did Mike believe logic was so important? Let's find out. Mike Mentzer's mission to restore logic. Mike Mentzer was known for his physique, his intensity, and his revolutionary approach to bodybuilding. But beneath all of that was something deeper. A man passionately devoted to logic, reason, and the disciplined use of the human mind. In his own words,
I have diligently trained myself to use logic to be able to make valid, philosophic, scientific identifications of the facts of reality, something that anyone with a normal, intact, functioning brain and the appropriate motivation can learn to do.
Mike believed logic wasn't simply useful in the gym. It was the foundation of a meaningful, independent, self-directed life. It was the antidote to confusion, to cultural irrationality, to intellectual dependence, and to blind conformity. As he said in 1995,
most people know nothing about logic or how to use it. They've never learned how to identify and evaluate the facts of reality.
But why was he so driven to teach logic? Because he understood profoundly that muscles without mind are only half a human life. As he put it,
for as wonderful as it may be to have a well-developed physique, without the ability to think logically and effectively about a subject, you are, in effect, consigning yourself to living as one half of a human being.
Mike didn't see bodybuilding as an isolated hobby. He saw it as part of a complete life, one in which the intellect must be trained with the same seriousness as the muscles.
I decided to undertake a study and gain as thorough an understanding as possible of the nature of logic. I did so to improve my thinking on all important issues, including the theory of high-intensity training. I realized that if I wanted to be better able to develop my training clients' muscles, I had to further develop my mind.
This video, therefore, is presented in the spirit of the book or seminar series Mike might have created had he lived. An accessible, powerful, everyday explanation of Aristotle's fundamental laws of logic, enriched and animated with Mentzer's own commentary. It is meant to be the lesson in critical thinking he never had the chance to fully deliver. Aristotle. More than 2,300 years ago, the Greek philosopher Aristotle attempted something revolutionary: to identify the basic principles by which human beings think correctly. He believed that reality was objective, knowable, and governed by consistent laws independent of human wishes or feelings. From this came the foundations of formal logic. principles that would later shape science, medicine, mathematics, and Western civilization itself. To Mike Mentzer, Aristotle was not merely an ancient philosopher, but the man who discovered the method by which human beings separate truth from confusion, fact from contradiction, and reason from irrationality. Mike saw in Aristotle not just a historical figure, but a great liberator, the discoverer of reason itself. As he stated during a seminar in 1996,
Aristotle was the greatest man who ever lived, as he was literally responsible for discovering the greatest of all discoveries in human history, the laws of logic, the principles of human thought.
Mike believed the rediscovery of Aristotle's method was the foundation of Western civilization itself, and he urged bodybuilders and non-bodybuilders alike to study his teachings on logic. And doing so, he believed, wasn't a chore, but exciting.
It's a way of understanding and feeling the world. You don't have to be a genius or a professional intellectual to do it. Philosophy is actually fun. The problem is that in most of our public schools, we are taught to associate learning with drudgery, boredom. That's the problem. You have to reprogram your computer, people. You have to identify explicitly the value of knowledge in your life and make it fun. What could be more ingenious? What could be more exciting than waking up every day enthusiastic to go out there and look for more knowledge?
He would add that it's not all that difficult an undertaking.
It does require a certain amount of mental effort, of course, over a period of time to understand the principles of thought, the laws of logic, but it's not infinitely complex. Anybody with a normal, intact, functioning brain can read Aristotle and learn the law of identity, the law of causality, how to use logic.
Moreover, Mike understood that science itself depends upon logic. Before one can conduct an experiment, one must first accept that reality is objective, that causes produce effects, and that contradictions cannot be true. Without logic, science collapses into opinion, emotion, and contradiction. We will now explore Aristotle's 3 fundamental laws of logic, but in a way that speaks through Mike's lens, Mike's passion, and Mike's relentless commitment to clarity. 1. The law of identity. A is A. The law of identity states that everything which exists has a specific nature. A thing is what it is. And because it possesses a specific nature, it cannot act contrary to that nature. Fire burns, water wets, gravity pulls. Human physiology responds according to biological law, not wishes, trends, slogans, or emotions. Once you correctly identify the nature of the thing you are investigating, your thinking becomes anchored to objective reality rather than opinion, confusion, or arbitrary belief. Mike frequently traced Aristotle's logic back to what philosophers call the axioms of existence, the self-evident facts that reality exists independent of our wishes.
Existence exists. A is A. That's the axiomatic concept upon which that's the edifice upon which the rest of human knowledge is built. An apple is an apple. An apple can't be an orange. There is an objective reality out there.
Mike summarized the principle even more directly years later.
The reality we live in is the only reality there is. Things are what they are. Learn to use your mind to identify those things accurately and evaluate them. Don't turn your mind into a distorting agent. Don't use your mind to evade the facts of reality. Confront reality as it is.
A fact is a fact. Reality is what it is, regardless of anyone's hopes, fears, or opinions. Mike embraced this law as the first requirement for clear thinking in bodybuilding and life. He understood that confusion begins the moment we fail to identify things clearly, concretely, and precisely.
Scores of bodybuilders from around the world who read my book, Heavy Duty 1, have informed me that it seemed like Chapter 1, entitled Bodybuilders Are Confused, was written specifically with him in mind. I accomplished this by logically identifying the nature and source of their confusion. It is this, understanding the nature and source of one's confusion, which is the first step toward resolving it.
The law of identity was why Mike took such pains to define the nature and identity of the two fundamental types of exercise, aerobic and anaerobic. In a 1996 seminar, he explained,
Aerobic exercise, as you well know, is of a low-intensity nature and is geared exclusively to the development of endurance of a certain type. Aerobic literally means with oxygen and is defined scientifically as low-intensity, long-duration exercise. That means carried out for long periods, because remember, the purpose of aerobics is to what? Build endurance, which means your capacity for performing more and more work. So it's low-intensity, long duration. Anaerobic activity, however, is an entirely different species of exercise, one that is geared exclusively, specifically to the development of strength, muscular size, and speed, and involves a different metabolic pathway, one that utilizes glycogen almost exclusively as its energy substrate, if you will. Anaerobic means literally without oxygen and is defined scientifically. It's just the opposite of aerobic. It's defined scientifically as high-intensity, short-duration exercise. This high-intensity anaerobic exercise is the science of bodybuilding exercise, not because I say so, it's just the way it is. The fundamental character of man's physiology, along with the specific nature of anaerobic metabolism, dictates what specific training causes must be enacted to affect the development of strength and muscular size beyond normal levels. Or in other words, reality and its laws, the laws of nature, determine how you must train. It has nothing to do with your wishes or whims. The specific actions required must be taken by any and all who truly desire stronger and larger muscles, whether they are cognizant of such or not, whether they like it or not. Again, we have this thing called reality and its laws, the laws of nature.
Once these identities are properly understood, Mike believed many contradictions in bodybuilding theory begin to disappear. If aerobic exercise is defined as low-intensity, long-duration activity, while anaerobic exercise is defined as high-intensity, brief-duration activity, then training methods emphasizing ever-increasing volume and duration inevitably move away from the very conditions required for maximal strength and muscular growth. Understanding this allows one to align training with the actual requirements of muscular development, rather than wasting effort on methods incompatible with the desired result. Mike would often be criticized for statements such as,
It could not possibly be true that all, or many, or even two training theories have equal merit. There is and can be only one valid scientific theory of anything like medicine, astronomy, physics, electronics, mathematics. Likewise, there is and can be only one valid theory of productive bodybuilding exercise, and I'm convinced that it's the theory of high-intensity training. However, I don't expect, nor do I want any of my clients necessarily to accept my conclusion based on my certainty, but I do like them to listen to the reasons why I'm certain, then arrive at their own conclusion.
Seen in this context, Mike's insistence that contradictory training theories cannot all be equally valid no longer appears dogmatic, but logical. After all, confusion thrives on vague concepts, shifting meanings, and unexamined assumptions. Logic begins with clear identification. Mike believed that clear thinking begins at the level of concept formation itself, the uniquely human ability to move beyond mere perception and consciously identify, define, and integrate the facts of reality.
Concepts aren't produced by the mind, nor are they revealed by the mind. They have to be gained by the mind through sensory means, and then given a definition by using a specific word for each. Denotation. It's a very important part of epistemology is the importance and nature of definitions and words, and of course how we get them is through perception and reason. There is an objective reality out there which we perceive, and then what we look for, we perform by an act of abstraction.
To Mike, this was not abstract philosophy disconnected from everyday life. The way a person defines concepts determines the way he thinks, and ultimately, the way he acts. If your concepts are vague, contradictory, or detached from reality, your conclusions will be confused as well. If a person continually spends more money than he earns, he is in debt, regardless of how successful he wishes to appear. If a bridge is structurally unsound, it will collapse, whether or not people believe in engineering principles. If a person never studies, knowledge will not magically appear during an examination. Reality does not bend itself to slogans, popularity, emotions, or wishes. Mike believed that clear identification was rare in modern culture.
We live in a militantly anti-rational culture where people are actively discouraged from thinking.
And so, the law of identity becomes an act of rebellion, a commitment to reality rather than conformity. The law of causality, cause and effect. From the law of identity comes another principle Mike emphasized constantly, the law of causality. Because things possess a specific nature, they act according to that nature. Causes produce effects. Reality is not random. Nature operates lawfully. Mike believed modern bodybuilding had become irrational, partly because people ignored causality and searched instead for shortcuts, trends, magical explanations, and emotionally comforting illusions detached from biological reality. As Mike explained,
nature, in order to be commanded, has to be obeyed.
If recovery is insufficient, progress slows. If stress exceeds recovery capacity, exhaustion follows. If training stimulates adaptation and adequate recovery is provided, muscular growth occurs. You cannot violate recovery requirements and expect optimal growth. You cannot endlessly increase workload while assuming adaptation will continue indefinitely. And you cannot expect contradictory causes to produce consistent effects. Mike understood that reality, not desire, is sovereign. As he humorously illustrated,
You will not develop a very good suntan sitting in front of a 100-watt light bulb.
reality remains what it is, whether we acknowledge it or not. Equivocation, the corruption of clear thinking. A fallacy closely tied to the law of identity is the fallacy of equivocation. Mike despised contradictions rooted in shifting definitions. Equivocation means using a word in different senses to create a false conclusion. For example, training hard subtly shifts into training a lot. Intense effort becomes long effort. Progress becomes activity. Mike saw this everywhere.
Most people are intellectually dependent. They've never learned how to identify and evaluate the facts of reality. Passively accept, blindly, uncritically follow the group.
Learning the law of identity is learning to refuse that kind of vague thinking. 2. The law of non-contradiction. A thing cannot be A and not A in the same respect and at the same time. This law is Aristotle's and Mentzer's core principle. A contradiction is a signal that something is wrong in your thinking. Mike believed this so deeply that he offered his students a bold challenge.
If you would take the time and listen to the logic of my argument and find one contradiction, I'll throw the whole damn thing out.
If someone was able to logically prove that the conceptual framework that supported heavy duty was somehow an error, I'd be more than ecstatic even to learn about my mistake. I'm more interested in the truth than being proved right or wrong.
To Mike, a contradiction was fatal to an idea. He saw it as the telltale sign of irrationality and the source of enormous suffering. To Mike, a contradiction was fatal to an idea. Examples of this in everyday life would be claiming to value health while living destructively, claiming truth matters while refusing to examine evidence, or claiming independence while merely repeating fashionable opinions. Mike believed contradictions destroy clarity, confidence, and happiness itself, and he frequently reminded people,
It doesn't matter how many knuckleheads would say 2 and 2 is 5, it's still 4.
reality cannot be voted out of existence.
Confusion, self-doubt, and uncertainty can be monstrously intolerable, most assuredly incompatible with self-esteem, confidence, and happiness.
The way out? identify contradictions, and remove them. A contradiction is not a harmless mistake. It is, as Mike taught, a betrayal of oneself. The self-contradiction fallacy. This is when an argument defeats itself. Examples of this would be statements such as, "There is no such thing as truth. Nothing is certain except uncertainty. Everyone's ideas are equally valid." Mike warned constantly against this kind of thinking, especially in bodybuilding. Logic liberates you from this dependence. It gives you the ability to rely on your own mind. Mike believed the essential difference between a rational human life and an animal-like existence was the voluntary act of conceptual thought.
Man, the human being, is not a cat, a dog, a bird, a horse. We are not instinctual creatures whose knowledge is hardwired into the nervous system. We have to gain our knowledge through a voluntary mental effort, i.e., we have to choose to think to gain knowledge.
Perception alone was not enough. One had to choose to think.
Human cognition combines perception and concept formation. Animal cognition is purely perceptual. The thing that makes us unique is the perceptual combined with the conceptual. Not the problem, but the important thing to say about that is the first aspect is involuntary, perceptual, requires no choice. But in order to engage the second part of the human mind, the concept formation, conceptual, requires volition, an act of choice. Only when you do that are you really the species man. Unless you continually make the choice to think, you're in the animal, you're in the perceptual. You're perceiving and reacting, you're not thinking, contextualizing, looking for similarities and differences.
And because most people never learn how to think properly,
They don't know how to distinguish truth from falsehood. In fact, the entire world, including the world of bodybuilding, is literally awash in a sea of false ideas.
logic liberates you from dependence by giving you the ability to rely on your own mind. 3. The law of the excluded middle, either A or not A. This law states that for any proposition, it is either true or false. There is no third option. Mike used this principle ruthlessly in his training philosophy. Either a program produces growth or it doesn't. Either the body recovers or it doesn't. Either an argument is logical or it is not, as he put it.
It is only on the basis of grasping the logical truth of an argument that one should agree.
Practical life examples of this are, either you train with enough intensity to stimulate growth or you do not. Either you allow enough rest for adaptation or you do not. Either you think independently or you follow the crowd. Mike believed rejecting false alternatives was essential to mental sovereignty. The false dilemma fallacy. Ironically, people misuse the law of the excluded middle to create fake either-or choices. Mike opposed this cultural tendency toward oversimplification.
Lacking the rudiments of rationality necessary to critically analyze ideas, the average bodybuilder today finds himself impotently bewildered, awash in an oceanic proliferation of new theories on training and nutrition. Unable to even begin to properly evaluate or judge the flood of conflicting, contradictory misinformation, most bodybuilders flounder helplessly.
False dilemmas oversimplify reality. Examples of this would be statements such as, either you train every day or you're not serious. Either you follow the crowd or you're arrogant. Either you annihilate yourself every workout or you're not hardcore. Either you follow science or you follow experience. Mike opposed this mentality because it oversimplified reality and discouraged independent thought. Logic as the foundation of independence. For Mike, logic was not just intellectual decoration. It was the means to personal liberation.
Logic is a method for using your mind. If you don't learn how to use it, then you're going to be lost. You will be not subject, but victim to all manner of false ideas.
He believed logic was the foundation of self-esteem, achievement, freedom, maturity, happiness. He often told his clients,
Knowledge is your means of achieving your goals. So, of course, the greater your knowledge, the greater your ability to reason, the more likely you'll achieve your goals.
And he believed that learning logic was transformative.
You'll soon make the delightful discovery that you've been developing your intellectual range and thereby maturing as a human being should. The practical result is that you become a more efficacious individual with considerable dominion or control over his being.
This is why he urged every bodybuilder to broaden their existence.
Why not consecrate this moment to that goal, the reaching of your full human stature, which can be accomplished only by learning how to think properly, logically, about all of the crucial fundamental issues of human existence.
Common fallacies Mike warned against. 1. Ad hominem. This fallacy occurs when someone attacks the character, motives, personality, appearance, or personal circumstances of an individual instead of addressing the actual argument being made. An argument is dismissed not because its reasoning is false, but because of who presented it. Mike rejected this method of thinking completely. He insisted that ideas must be judged according to logic, evidence, and internal consistency, not popularity, personality, or reputation. In bodybuilding, this fallacy appears whenever someone says, he doesn't look impressive, therefore his ideas must be wrong. Or, he's arrogant, so his arguments can't be trusted. Or, he never won the Olympia, therefore his training philosophy is invalid. But none of those statements address whether the argument itself is logically true. As Mike pointed out,
and I never expected anyone to accept what it was I had to say because I've garnered a few titles. If what I have to say isn't valid in and of itself and doesn't appeal to your reason and common sense, then it is worth nothing in the long run.
Mike repeatedly challenged people to evaluate principles rationally rather than emotionally or socially. He asked for logic, not loyalty, tribalism, or personality worship. 2. Bandwagon fallacy. This fallacy occurs when something is assumed to be true, correct, or superior simply because large numbers of people believe it, practice it, or repeat it. Popularity is substituted for proof. Mike spent much of his career opposing this mentality in bodybuilding. He understood that widespread acceptance does not guarantee truth. Entire cultures and industries can repeat false ideas for decades. He warned that many trainees adopt methods not because they have logically evaluated them, but because they fear disagreeing with the crowd. As Mike reminded people,
let me remind you that for thousands of years, millions of people sincerely believed the earth was flat. That didn't mean it was true.
In bodybuilding, this fallacy appears when people conclude every professional bodybuilder trains this way, so it must be optimal. Everyone online recommends this program, therefore it works. This method is popular, so it must be scientifically correct. Mike believed truth is established by logic, causality, and evidence, not by consensus, repetition, or social conformity. 3. Appeal to emotion. This fallacy occurs when feelings are substituted for evidence and logic. Instead of asking whether an idea is true, a person asks whether it feels inspiring, comforting, exciting, or socially accepted. An argument does not become valid because it generates enthusiasm, fear, outrage, or hope. Mike respected emotion, but only after facts had first been identified logically. He understood that emotions are consequences of ideas and evaluations. They are not tools of cognition themselves. In bodybuilding, this fallacy appears constantly. A trainee follows a program because it feels hardcore, trusts an influencer because he is charismatic, or accepts claims because they are emotionally motivating rather than logically demonstrated. Mike believed that reality, not emotional intensity, must always remain the standard of truth. 4. Hasty generalization. This fallacy occurs when a broad conclusion is drawn from insufficient evidence or too few examples. One isolated case is treated as proof of a universal rule. Mike spent much of his career fighting this error in bodybuilding theory. People would point to one genetically gifted bodybuilder training with high volume and immediately conclude high volume must therefore be best for everyone. Or they would see one person succeed on a fad diet and conclude this diet is universally superior. Mike insisted that conclusions must be based on principles, context, evidence, and causal understanding, not isolated anecdotes. A single example may illustrate a principle, but it cannot establish one by itself. 5. Intellectual dependence. This is the habit of accepting ideas, beliefs, or conclusions merely because they are popular, traditional, authoritative, or socially reinforced, without personally reevaluating the evidence and logic behind them. Rather than thinking independently, the individual surrenders judgment to the group. To Mentzer, this was not merely a philosophical mistake, it was one of the central tragedies of modern culture. He believed most people had never truly learned how to identify facts, analyze arguments, or reason from first principles. Instead, they absorb opinions passively.
Most people are intellectually dependent. They're born into a given family by chance, into a given region by chance, into a given nation by chance. Uncritically, unquestionably, blindly, they accept the religion their family brings them up in. They accept their parents or their locale's political beliefs. They're intellectual dependents. They've never learned how to identify and evaluate the facts of reality.
Mike believed logic was the antidote to this dependence. The purpose of reason was not conformity, but intellectual self-reliance, the ability to evaluate ideas independently and arrive at conclusions because they are true, not because they are fashionable or widely repeated. The logic Mike wanted you to use. Mike's ultimate goal was never obedience to him, not loyalty to a guru, not conformity to a tribe, only this.
My purpose is to teach you to think logically about training and nutrition so that ultimately you'll be able to think independently about these subjects and thus become your own trainer, your own coach, and never again have to rely on the suspect opinion of others.
In an age of influencers, slogans, tribalism, commercialism, and endless confusion, Mike Mentzer believed the most revolutionary act a human being could perform was simple: to think. As Mike said,
in short, you might seek to actualize your human stature.
And that begins and ends with learning to think.